Brian Cheung joining us now with a look at how the economy is playing a role in this election. To say the economy is playing a role in this election like that is kind of an understatement. It is playing a massive role. We have talked about this subject specifically, inflation, unemployment, the way voters feel about that a ton, because it is so important, right, Brian? I mean, we see it topping so many polls as the top most important issue, and that's across generations, that's across genders. Give us a sense of how the economy is doing right now. Let's start there, and how it compares to how voters are feeling. We've seen sort of like it's like this missing puzzle piece a lot of times, or even though we're getting positive information about the economy, voters still don't feel good. And I hear so constantly, the number one thing I hear is it sucks to go to the grocery store right now. What are voters feeling right now?
Yeah, and you absolutely cannot discount that that's the way that people feel. But here's the challenge, is that at the national level, the averages show that the economy is doing pretty well. When you take a look at inflation, for example, at 2.4%, that's the yearly pace of price increases. That is a vast improvement from the over 9% inflation rate that we had seen in the summer of 2022. And then on the job side of things, right, because yes, inflation is certainly hurting Americans, but what would be worse is if they didn't have jobs. We're not seeing mass layoffs in this economy. When you talk about an unemployment rate that's at 4.1%, just a smidge above where it was pre-pandemic. But here's the problem. Over the last 4 years, there has been an enormous skyrocketing in prices. And yes, wages have gone up by about 20% in the last 4 years, but food prices, they're up about 22%. So the increase in the price tags have eroded the increase in the size of your wallet. But here's the good news, is that the pace of inflation has slowed as of late. And recent numbers that we've gotten on consumer confidence from the likes of the Conference Board have shown that consumer confidence and optimism over the economy is improving as of the last few months. The question is, Savannah, do they take that optimism with them to the polls? And
let's talk about what we know from each candidate and their economic plans, because I've heard such conflicting things. So many people, even people who say they're voting for Harris, will say, I kind of think Trump would handle the economy better. Or I'm just hearing voters totally say, Harris would handle it better, Trump would handle it better, for their various reasons. What can you tell us about what we actually know about what they each say they would do should they become president?
Yeah, and, you know, the challenge here, and I was just talking to John Allen about this offset, but really the challenge here is that economy is not really a pro or con thing. When you talk about things like abortion or even tax policy, hey, I'm in support of this, or I'm against this. When it comes to the economy, everyone's pro-economy, and it's a number of different policy issues, actually in some cases hundreds of policy issues that are wrapped into one question. How do you feel about the economy? It's a very complex thing, but here's what we know from each campaign. The Harris campaign has said, look, we're going to promise to keep that commitment that Joe Biden promised in the 2020 election, not to tax anyone that's making over $400,000 in income. Instead, they would increase the corporate tax. Whereas on the Trump side of things, they would like to extend a lot of their first administration era tax cuts, which, by the way, many of which are still in place right now, and cut the tax rates for both individuals and also for corporations. But again, as I mentioned, the economy is not a singular issue. There are also things like childcare, drug prices, food regulation through, consolidation and mergers and acquisitions. These are really complicated issues, which the campaign has tried to message over the last few months. Again, another big question is whether or not that gets into the heads of those that are going into the polls today.
Jonathan Allen, you were name checked. I believe you get a chance to respond and just jump into this conversation about how important it is to voters. So I want to hear what you think and any questions you have for Brian.
Yeah, personal prerogative. I think Brian makes an incredibly good point that there are so many issues wrapped up in the economy. And yet, I thought the Gen Z voter stat there, where 60% of them say they're worried about not being able to buy a home, but only 32% of them, if I'm recalling correctly, say that the economy is their top issue. And to my way of thinking, I'm like, if I felt like that was the problem, that would rise up really quickly in the priority. But Brian, the question that I wanted to ask you as you look at this, how do you think we should perceive the economy question? Is it really just a sort of proxy for the question of whether people feel good or bad about the track of the country, as opposed to reading it, specific to the economy?
Which, by the way, if I may add, the answer to that is often low, too, right? Are we on the right or wrong track? It's usually wrong, is a much higher stat. Brian, go ahead.
Absolutely. And here's the challenge is that, inflation is something that is also very nebulous. I mean, even when you take the economy, which is already such a huge topic to wrap your arms around, even if you drill down to inflation, there are so many factors. How much power do corporations have in raising prices at the store? How much is it your dollars? And is it just simply a supply chain issue where there are too many dollars chasing too few things. There are so many things that go into inflation. But when it comes to perception, it's really about looking at your budget. Every time you pay your credit card bill, every time you drive past the gas station, these are the reference points that you have in gauging what is the health of the economy. And I think that another big thing that we need to talk about here is housing, because that's the biggest cost for most Americans, those mortgage payments or your monthly rent payments. And those have been skyrocketing over the past few years, too. But is that the fault of a single policy from a single administration? No, you could argue that it's the accumulation of decades of underbuilding and not enough supply that can improve the availability of different units that can drive prices lower. So this is part of the conversation as well. We've seen the Harris campaign go out in places like Las Vegas and say, hey, you know what? Let's try to rethink the way that we zone and the way that we use Bureau of Land Management rules and regulations to try to increase the supply of housing available in those areas. These are really big questions. But again, it's the economy, but can regular voters explain exactly what policy issue can fix the economy? It's never just one thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But what I mentioned before, I think, is the most important thing with voters is you hear them say things like, the grocery store is so much more expensive. I had a young voter just tell me yesterday, when I started to drive, the gas wasn't expensive, and now gas is expensive. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's those types of things. Jonathan, before we hit break, I just want to ask you, if people just feel bad, even if the metrics are telling us things aren't bad, does it feeling bad hurt Harris just because she has been in this administration for the last 4 years?
So it normally would, right? 100% chance that if Joe Biden is still the candidate, those who are like, I don't like the way the country's going, sort of bad, just sort of vibes, if you will, are more likely to vote against the incumbent. But what we've got now in this race is two non-incumbent candidates. Neither one of these people is president. And I was surprised to see over the course of this election that so many voters said that they saw Harris representing change. Even though she's the vice president for the president, her policies, to the extent that they are different than his, tend to be kind of Joe Biden policies on steroids, right? Adding some money to the homeowner subsidy she wants to do, that kind of thing. And yet, she has been able to present herself as a change candidate. So if you wanted somebody other than the current president, you know that that's going to happen. The question is, do you think Donald Trump, if you're voting solely on the economy or your perception of the economy, do you think Donald Trump's going to be better for that? Do you think Harris is going to be better for that? And by the way, when you talk to voters, they don't always vote based on their own economic views. Sometimes they look at the whole thing and say, I think the country would be better off for this.
John Allen, Brian Cheung, thank you both very much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.